Hello and welcome to Affected by Altitude, the Colorado Rockies podcast on Rocky Mountain Rooftop, proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network, a special live edition. I am your host, Evan Lang, who definitely did not forget to hit the go live button the first time around, and that's why we're starting 2 minutes late. And with me, as always, is Skyler Timmons. Skyler, what are we doing on this fine Wednesday evening?
Well, since there's absolutely nothing going on in the baseball world here on this Wednesday, there's no baseball till Friday, no minor league baseball going on. All-Star game's done with. The draft is over with. Everybody's just playing college football 25 on their PlayStations and their Xboxes. We figured, hey, let's talk about the draft.
I haven't started playing CFB 25 yet, but boy, am I looking forward to.
I don't have a console to do it.
Well, fix that. This is a special live edition of the show, so we have chat and comments. Rocky Sweden says, "The drip," and I say, "Thanks, I'm part of the problem."
The hat in person, that doesn't look too shabby.
Honestly, for the National League All-Star kit, the overall looked pretty good, I think, especially on the live TV broadcast. The American League stuff looked better in motion, but still not good. That neon red just really did not work with the tan, and it's disappointing. But there is rumor has it that they might be going back to just wearing their regular uniforms during the actual All-Star game. Commissioner Rob Manfred said the sentiments have been heard. So we'll see if they actually do it.
He heard the sentiments, and they were this.
It stinks. It stinks. It stinks.
There we go.
Yeah, really, there's been, honestly, the All-Star jerseys have been really hit or miss since they started wearing them in the actual game. We had the 2021 uniforms for the when it was here in Colorado, and they were very clearly the hastily repurposed jerseys they were going to use in Atlanta with that color scheme. So, navy blues and some reds and whites and all of that stuff. 2022 in Los Angeles was fine. It was like an updated take on having everybody wear their own uniforms, but instead they were in white and dark gray with gold lettering and numbering and all of that stuff. Whatever. And then last year's were pretty solid. I liked them, but sort of like the marine camo uniforms for the Mariners. I thought they were overall fine, but this year, oof, the American League jersey is just so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I still bought one. Not an American League one, but I did buy an All-Star jersey because I am, first and foremost, a sucker. And second of all, I got that FOMO when it comes to the All-Star jerseys. I never got to buy them as a kid, and there's a ton I wished I had. And so now I feel like I got to get them so I don't miss out. But we're not here to talk about the All-Star game. We're here to talk about something that happens during the All-Star break, and that is the Major League Baseball Rule 4 Amateur First-Year Player Draft.
Hooray!
I was hoping you had like an applause or something on the sound machine.
No, I don't.
You've got all that other stuff, but you don't have like applause.
No.
You've got Jay Sherman. You won't add King of Albuquerque, despite my Mayor of Albuquerque, despite my insistence.
Here's the closest thing I have. Donkey Kong, take it away.
Yeah.
It's as close as we'll get.
Good enough. We'll roll with it. So the Rockies overall made 21 draft selections this season, including a couple pretty big surprises. 13 pitchers overall, and then the rest are position players. And I think we might as well just roll right into it because the first overall pick, being a position player, was a bit of a surprise. Pretty much every mock draft that I saw out there was looking like Chase Burns out of Wake Forest was going to be the Rockies pick at third overall. And then he went second overall to the Cincinnati Reds. And instead the Rockies selected a corner infielder and corner outfielder Charlie Condon from the University of Georgia. And apparently the Rockies front office were salivating at the fact that he dropped down to third overall. Like, they view this guy as a potential franchise changer, face of the franchise kind of guy. And Condon was a player who was one of several guys who could have gone first overall in the draft. It ended up being Travis Pisana out of goodness, what school did he play for? Oregon, who went first overall to the Cleveland Guardians. But the fact that Charlie Condon and the organization was so extremely high on him, and he was a guy that other teams were kind of high on, it was kind of nice. Yeah, Rocky Sweden says we have a pretty good record for guys named Charlie from Georgia, and I have to agree.
Yeah, it's worked out pretty well. And this is a nice pick, I think, for everybody. And we already went in a lot about him in our last episode of the podcast last Monday in Affected by Altitude back on the 15th. But we got some more updated info, some quotes that came from it. And the big one was just how excited the Rockies are about this guy. And they figure him as a franchise player, a face of the franchise, a cornerstone player. Now, we compared it a lot to this is their redo on the Chris Bryant draft back in 2013, where he was taken by the Cubs. The Rockies were set. We're going to get him. He's our number one choice. And then the Cubs take him. So now they're getting their redo 10 or so years later, where here's the cornerstone guy they can focus on, who has a lot of the skill set that they like, just a nice all-around player that can hit for power, has a pretty good plate approach, can get on base, draw walks, didn't strike out a ton. In his college career, hits a lot of dingers, and off the field, just a really good guy. So he checks a lot of boxes for him, and it's going to be a matter of how soon do we see him make it to the big leagues. But there's a lot to like about this kid, and we could see him here in a Rockies uniform probably sooner rather than later, even sometime next year.
He's 6'6" and 216 pounds at age 21. There is talk of him being fast-tracked like Wyatt Langford was for the Texas Rangers, drafted and developed very quickly, wanting to be an immediate contributor. And, Condon, one of the best overall hitters in the draft, 60 hit tool, 70 power tool. Overall value, they gave him a 65. And he just hit like crazy last year. He led basically Division I batting average at 433, slugging at 1.009 with 37 home runs and 58 total extra base hits. OPS last year of 1.565, which is an absurd figure. So he's hoping to be something really special for this organization. It's just they'll need to figure out where they are going to play him. He was drafted as an outfielder. He can also play first and third base. And they're going to want to figure out where to put him.
Yeah, because you can watch some highlights and MLB Pipeline with some of their assessment of him, where he's athletic, but maybe he can get going with long strides, and it takes him a little while to get going. So it's going to just be tough figuring out where to slot him in, because is he going to really fit in the outfield at Coors Field? I don't know. Coors Field is a tough one to get, or tough to play. Maybe he can play third base, but again, the scouts are like, he can move well over there, but maybe not enough to stick there full time. So it's just figuring out where can you get him in permanently. I'm in the first base camp. I think he'd be good at first base. And he checks a lot of these boxes of, well, he's our new version of Chris Bryant. Where can we stick him in there? And hopefully his back holds up.
For me, for slotting in Condon, the first base is the easy choice. There is also the low probability choice would be third base. He could play a perfectly cromulent third base, but that would require the Rockies to trade Ryan McMahon, which it was made pretty clear over the weekend that is not going to happen. Ryan McMahon coming out and Bill Schmidt coming out, basically both saying, we've told each other that we're not going anywhere, which is fine. I honestly never expected them to even have Ryan McMahon on the market. So this is not a surprise. It just limits the variability of Condon. It makes Michael Tolia's life a little bit more difficult, because he's basically now only got this year to prove that he's the guy at first base moving forward.
Yeah. And hey, good problems to have. Condon can move up really quickly. He kind of can follow in those. I think it was Nate Rocktober over on Twitter, a nice highlight that the Rockies have drafted really only 3 college position players, and they were or up to this point or something in the first round. I'll preface that in the first round in those top 10 picks. And it was Troy Tulowitzki, Todd Helton, and now Charlie Condon. And one of those guys is a Hall of Famer, got up to the big leagues really quick. One was on a Hall of Fame trajectory until injuries. He moved up within a year onto the big league roster. And so Condon could be another of those franchise guys that could be suiting up really quickly. So really excited about that pick. The fact that he fell to number 3 right into their laps, I think it's a pretty unanimous, like, this is perfect, a great pick for the Rockies, and it's a good pairing, and excited to see what he does.
Yeah, overall, really good pick. Then the second pick the Rockies made on day one with their competitive balance pick was one that I am extremely high on. Outside of Charlie Condon, this is probably my favorite pick in the draft, and that is right-handed pitcher Brody Brecht out of the University of Iowa. A two-sport athlete, decided on baseball after playing football for the Hawkeyes. Brody Brecht has some of the craziest raw stuff in the draft this year. He's graded with a 70 fastball, a 70 slider, and a 50 splitter. And we know the Rockies like that split finger, so that is an interesting pitch for him to have. Here's the problem. His control is not so great. So he's definitely he's a project. But I think what taking Brody Brecht, and we'll talk about later some of these other pitchers in this draft, are saying that the Rockies are feeling confident in their new pitching lab where they want to start developing pitchers more, especially with some of the guys that we've seen really emerge here in this season in the minors, where, yeah, we have Chase Dollander, who was as good as expected, but then you've got all these other guys who are just pitching like crazy, especially in Fresno and Spokane.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of more of those refined arms that are going to be immediate guys that are I think this was a good year to start getting some of these guys. Okay, they're not going to be immediate. We're not going to have to fast track them at the moment. The guys that just have this good raw stuff that we can kind of develop on. And he's got a lot of that power, kind of a power pitcher, can get those strikeouts, which, hey, I'll take it. I love a guy that can get strikeouts. Can he stay in the zone enough to really make them worthwhile? Because if you're striking out a ton of guys, that's awesome. But if you're walking a lot of guys, it means you're dealing with a lot of command issues. You're not going to really get deep into ball games as a starter. I think so. It's going to be what they're working on, but it's that good athletic build and versatility it's going to be big. And you see people on Twitter, they're like, this is a pretty good value for the Rockies that they were able to get him 38th overall. That competitive balance that he made it down there, and a great value pick for a lot of folks. And the Rockies were able to snag him because he's got those nice peripherals. You can look at him and say, I can see why they like this. If he can just fine tune some things, he can be a very dangerous pitcher.
There's a lot to like about a 90-mile-per-hour slider, I think.
Yeah. And if it takes having guys throwing splitters too, instead of just sinker ballers everywhere, I'll take it, because you can throw a splitter with some heat.
And that's something we've seen from, Cal Quantrill is really utilizing the splitter this year up with the Rockies on the major league level. So it's interesting to see a couple more guys get splitters down on the minor league level. And for his control, Brody Brecht actually, has shown some improvement. So in 2023 season with Iowa, he walked 61 batters in 77 innings with 109 strikeouts. This year in 78 and a third innings, 128 strikeouts and 49 walks. So there is improvement, and there definitely are signs that this can be a really great pick for this team.
Yeah, a nice savvy pick, and excited to see how he does. And maybe he goes start some time down in the complex league if he does end up working this year. Spend some time down there, maybe get a start or two down in Fresno down the stretch. But excited to see how he develops the team.
Definitely. And a little bit of a chip on his shoulder we saw from Twitter after he did not go in the first round. Just tweeted in all caps, good.
Yeah. He's got that dog in him.
I'm more than happy to have a guy on this team in this organization who has something he feels like he needs to prove.
Yeah, most definitely.
But Brody Brecht, really, really interesting pick. And then the third pick of day one is still a very highly touted prospect. He was number 60 in the top 250 college draft prospects per MLB Pipeline, and we took him at the 42nd pick overall, and that is University of Texas outfielder and first baseman Jared Thomas. In my opinion, part of this is being a little bit under slot value, especially with the Condon pick and then potentially the Brody Brecht pick, where you might want to pay one of those guys a little bit extra, or the slot value of the first round pick is still pretty high. But it's not a bad pick. I think the most interesting thing about Jared Thomas is that he was a project under Troy Tulowitzki coaching down at the University of Texas. And Thomas Harding over at MLB.com, the Rockies beat reporter, had a really interesting article about how he worked with Tulo and he's actually really familiar with the Rockies. Mentions that one of the players he emulated growing up was Charlie Blackmon. So it's a really interesting fit. And I really like seeing what Troy Tulowitzki worked on with him. So a quote from this article, Thomas talking about his work with Tulowitzki, is it really came down to certain counts. And it was something me and Tulo worked on this past offseason, being able to get your best swing off in a leverage count. And that's something the Rockies have been kind of struggling to do and trying to add on to their big league roster. And having a guy who can come into this organization and already gotten a head start on that, I think is going to be big. For Jared Thomas, it's interesting because they don't think he was a particularly good first baseman. He does sort of chart better as an outfielder, 60 fielding score, 55 run score. He doesn't have a ton of power, but he can put some pop in, projects to maybe like 15, 20 homers per season. Center field potentially as his position, but it's tough because the Rockies outfield is so crowded that you're not sure if/when he's going to get that playing time. But, he'll start in the lower levels of the minor league system and work his way up.
Yeah, it's that nice toolsy, can play all three outfield spots, can play first base because that's what the Longhorns needed. Good defensively, versatile, and then just a good solid lefty. And I think one of the big things for him this past year was working on developing that power a little more. So led to those swing and misses, but that was a conscious choice for him of wanting to just hit for more power a little bit. So now it's a good solid pick.
Yeah, like I said, it being, or rather, I should say, him being potentially an underslot value kind of pick does not mean it's a bad pick. Not at all. And in his last season at the University of Texas, he had an OPS of 1.069, 16 home runs, 15 doubles, 4 triples, and 18 stolen bases. And he drew a decent amount of walks, 31 walks over 60 games. So, that's not bad. That'll play. I'm really interested to see where the Rockies take him from a development standpoint. I don't think it's going to be at first base, but, the outfield is a potential future depending on what the Rockies decide to do with some of their other outfield prospects.
Yeah, it's a good solid pick. Nice second round pick that you can slot in and just adds into that mix of, it could be a kind of a extra guy who can slot in, nice versatile utility. Maybe you can slot in eventually as an everyday guy. There's a lot of opportunities for him.
Definitely. That about wraps it up for day one of the Colorado Rockies draft. We're going to take a quick break for the download version of the show so we can get an ad break for our audio version of the podcast. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back to Affected by Altitude with Evan and Skyler on this special live at time of recording episode where we are talking about the Colorado Rockies draft here in 2024. Just finished talking about day one, and we're going to go ahead and move on to day two here. So might as well just dive right into it. Pick that a lot of people have been really high on was the Rockies' 3rd round pick at 77th overall, and that's South Carolina catcher Cole Messina. I've seen a couple people say that the more they read about this guy, the more interested they are in him as a pick. On its surface, his scouting grades are kind of like they're nothing amazing to look at. So you look, he's got a 45 hit tool, a 50 power tool, 30 run. He's a catcher, 50 arm, 50 field. But I think it's going to be an interesting pick because he's a solid defensive catcher. He's got a good plate approach that has really been praised from the right-handed side of the plate. And also, they really like his ability to call games and lead the clubhouse.
Yeah, no, that's the big thing. And looking at him, I wrote about something over at fansfirstsports.com. And just looking at him, he's a kind of more of an offensive first catcher because he's got big power. He draws a healthy amount of walks. Now, there can be some swing and miss in there on fastballs and stuff, but he doesn't have a huge strikeout problem. And so it's a matter of just making that consistent contact. But he's a good, solid, athletic guy behind the dish. Where, yeah, maybe he's a more of an average arm and cutting runners down. No, and you look at him, kind of a bigger guy. You think, oh, he's probably not that good behind the dish. But I think he was ranked as one of the best pitch framers in college baseball last year. Won the Johnny Bench Award, which is awarded to the best catcher in baseball, in college baseball in D1. So he has all those tools where he could stick behind the plate and takes charge of the field. And that's what you need in a catcher, a leader on the field that can know how to handle pitchers, can handle the infield and lead the charge behind the dish. And he gets it done on both sides of the ball. And it's a really nice, solid pick. He reminds me of that comp of Elias Diaz that the Rockies have now. A good, solid guy behind the dish defensively, and then pretty good at the plate, which is so hard to find in a catcher. And Jerry Weinstein, the longtime catching and scouting development assistant for the Rockies, he's taught catching at all the levels in baseball for the Rockies. Been with them for a long time. They asked him, Jerry, can you rank them? Rank all the catchers you're available, and right at the top was Cole Messina that they were able to snag. And his brother was drafted by the Blue Jays, a pitcher. So I think their pair of brothers both got drafted in the same draft. But you look at him, he fits a lot of things, and he's an exciting player to look at where, depending on how he sticks and where he could fit in, it's a sneaky good pick for the Rockies, I think.
I think it's really fun, the idea of a brother catching and pitcher battery.
Yeah.
A big thing about Messina is that, and this was brought up by Blake Street Banner. He's got great exit velocity, so he averaged 108.2 miles per hour in exit velocity, but he also elevates the ball really well, which is actually something that Charlie Condon and Jared Thomas do well in addition to Messina. And I think that's something the Rockies have been looking at because they've had such a problem with ground balls recently where, they want their guys to be hitting for power, but instead a lot of guys are hitting things into the dirt at a higher than average clip. And it has improved slightly in recent years, but now we've got 3 position player draft picks who are all pretty good at elevating the ball, keeping the ball off the ground for some power, for some thump. And that's a really cool aspect to focus on for Messina. Overall, I agree. I think this is going to be a pretty sneaky good pick for the Rockies.
Yeah, and fits into that mold, and there's some adding to that catching depth in the system that probably needs bolstering a little bit more. And he's a good one. And like you're saying, a lot of these picks, position players, it's these more refined approaches where it's not all or nothing, home run or bust. But these are guys that aren't just hitting home runs, but they're hitting for a good average. They're getting on base. They're drawing walks. They may swing and miss, but it's not leading to more strikeouts necessarily. So just develop approaches.
I think that's also why the Rockies picked pretty much exclusively college players this draft.
Yeah.
They want a little bit more refinement in their prospects to add to their system. So Cole Messina, great pick. And then we move on to the next one where A third baseman, kind of a surprise. Blake Wright out of Clemson was drafted 4th round with the 106th overall pick. Blake Wright is not in the top 250 in terms of prospects, but he's a pretty interesting pick. One, to see the Rockies go for another third baseman, corner infielder. But again, this is another guy who might accommodate being sort of a lower slot value kind of guy. He was the starting third baseman for Clemson. He's got solid power. He makes a lot of contact, which is good. So he's got quick hands for an aggressive approach, and he's a pretty solid defender. He can also play second, so he's got that defensive versatility that the Rockies really like. Pretty much all of their third basemen play or can play another position.
Yeah,
from Ryan McMahon up at the top all the way down to the bottom.
Yeah, and that was the big theme for this draft was versatility. And so he could be a guy that, you still need utility guys that can play around the field to fill out a roster. And he kind of fits that bill of a good solid hitter, good defensively, kind of checks a lot of boxes where you don't necessarily will have to start him every day, but he can be that backup guy that can fill in as needed. And yeah, you need guys up the middle, especially. You're always going to need extra guys that can play up the middle.
Fairly low strikeout rate as well. Only 37 strikeouts and 16 walks over 60 games for Clemson, while he hit 340, 383, 652, and 22 home runs, 75 RBI.
Mm-hmm.
That'll play. I honestly like the pick. It's interesting because we do have so many, third base kind of prospects. We have so many prospects who are on that side of the field. Mm-hmm. But overall, I like the pick.
Yeah, the Padres always go for shortstops. A lot of the time, the Rockies go for outfielders and third basemen. Oops, all third basemen.
Well, you can only have so many third basemen, right?
No, they have to play everything.
More.
More.
Next pick in the draft, 5th round pick, 139th overall. It's LeBaron Johnson Jr., a right-handed pitcher, again from the University of Texas. So 2 picks from the University of Texas in this draft. And for this one, I actually want to turn to one of the few people who provided us some thoughts on the draft as we were reaching out to prepare for this episode. My man Plant, so if you're listening, this is all on you. Said he finds it a sneaky good pick for the player himself, not really where he was taken. If LeBaron was like a round or 2 lower, I'd be happier. But the point is, the player I'm thinking is sneaky good. I think we got a starting pitcher for the minor league system and a relief spot starter for the bigs. His 2023 was really good with an ERA of 2.91 and a fastball that hits around 97. It got hit hard, but I do think that can be fixed, especially with some upbringing of some of his other pitch types, including a slider that I love and a nice simple change that I think would work in cores because of the low spin rate. I'd love to see a 4th pitch added to his bag and actually be used often enough to help, like a knuckle curve. I think if he becomes consistent with mixing his pitches, gets a little bit more control, and the coaching staff helps him with his fastball, there's a chance at him being a number 4-5 starter with the Rockies, and the worst case is he's a bullpen guy. Doesn't hurt that he comes from a really good pitching program like Texas. I read recently that the Rockies wanted to take Johnson last year, but had news or thoughts that he was wanting to return to Texas. So there was also familiarity with the scouting squad in the front office, which is never a bad thing in my eye. Thanks so much for that input. I definitely hope so. This was only the 2nd pitcher that the Rockies took in this draft, and it is an interesting one.
Yeah, and I think it was they wanted to take him last year. They like his arm and his build and everything, and then they figured, hey, we'll get him this year as a senior and everything. And there's a lot to like, and it's like a lot of these guys, maybe some projects where they just need to develop some things, but a good arm, a good arm that they're able to kind of sneak in there and snag out. They're in the 5th round.
Yeah, the big thing for Johnson is he's got a slider that can touch 90 if necessary, which again, I like sliders that are high velocity. That's fun to me. And it really is going to be working on that fastball. 1.055 OPS against for that fastball this season. it's getting hit hard. But if you can, work on that pitch and get it to be a functional pitch, even if you maybe shave a little bit of velocity off, so we can max out at 97, 98 on that. But if you can shave a little bit off of that in favor of some more control, that's a totally usable pitch.
Yeah. And he kind of, in a way, I kind of think of Jaden Hill when I saw that pick with LeBaron Johnson Jr., which, man, that's a hard name. Coming out of a bullpen or something. It's a nice name. But he could be like a Jaden Hill where he could maybe develop as a starter and whatnot, or you can transition him into the bullpen and take advantage there, where you can mitigate some of those control issues and take advantage of the high strikeouts. So there's some versatility there of a really good arm that has a lot of upside.
Yeah, and then the Rockies continued to draft pitching for a couple picks after this, and they went with a left-handed pitcher in the 6th round named Connor Eaton out of George Mason University, a school that I'm not overly familiar with, but just looking at Eaton's profile, he's very much in the mold that the Rockies like when it comes to their lefties. A little bit tricky, lower velocity on the fastball, but has some above average breaking pitches. He's got a slider and a changeup, and both of those work pretty well, like things that don't need a ton of work. The changeup has potential, but his slider is his best secondary pitch.
Mm-hmm.
It's the mold. It's the Rockies mold. I'm surprised he doesn't throw a sinker, but
the funky lefty mold. How hard does he throw? That will be the question, because if you're a lefty for the Rockies, it can't be too hard. For some reason.
His fastball sits 91 to 94. It peaks at 96, which is a little bit higher than some of the other lefties in the organization. But it's, Sean Sullivan, Carson Palmquist, Kyle Freeland, your Rockies lefties in the org who've all got that low, tricky arsenal with the low velo fastball.
There you go. They have a mold for lefties, and they do not deviate.
Well, I'll take that over having just a mold for every pitcher like we used to do. So,
yeah, if he throws 88 in a sinker, he'd be golden.
Next pick in the draft, number 7, round 7, pick 198 is Fidel Ulloa, a right-handed pitcher from LSU. Projected to be a reliever, but he did have a very good track record as a starter with LSU.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like he probably could be another bullpen prospect for the Rockies, which is what they need. Lefties, that's their thin market, is lefty bullpen guys, where they've got plenty of starters or guys that can start. But when it comes to lefty bullpen pieces, which is something the Rockies are always hurting for at the big league level, it's good to maybe stock up on a few more of those guys, just kind of stick them in there somewhere and just see how they develop. And he kind of fits that mold.
I actually do apologize. The starts for Ulloa came in summer league versus with LSU. He was strictly a reliever with LSU last season. 4.63 ERA over 19 appearances, 23 1/3 inning, 26 strikeouts, 11 walks, 10 strikeouts per 9. Definitely some stuff to work on for him. But the big thing for here is, again, his fastball. It's mid 90s, can touch high 90s, and it's got some play. And he's also got a pretty good slider.
Yeah, and I just realized I was looking at the wrong player for. He's right-handed, and stuff still fits. You just need good bullpen arms
for this team, and especially it's tough because with this organization right now, there are a couple bullpen prospects. You got Zach Agnos, you got Angel Chivi, but overall, you got Jaden Hill. But overall, throughout the organization, there's not nearly as many bullpen prospects as there are starting prospects.
Yeah, and that's usually how it works too. Because a lot of teams are drafting guys as starters and then converting them with that intent of, oh, you're going to be a reliever. Because in college, a lot of these guys are starting a lot lot of the time, and then they get drafted.
Our bullpen's really bad, so maybe we should get some guys who are focused on being relievers from the get-go.
Yeah, like especially in college where they're, maybe they'll start on the weekend, or they're that guy that has to come in the fourth inning and then throw a couple innings or something. So the bullpens are always a lot more varied. And there's our pal Patrick Lyons.
Yeah, Patrick Lyons popping up in the chat. Of the 21 players selected by the Rockies, 13 were pitchers, but only one was taken during the first 4 rounds. Starting depth strong in the minors, about to be stronger after the trade deadline? Yes to both. So we talked about a little bit earlier, but right now, especially in the lower levels of the minors, but it's starting to trickle upward because we've got some pretty solid pitching in Double-A as well. But in Spokane especially, and some of that's moving up after the All-Star break, very strong pitching depth from some top prospects and some guys who were unexpected. You've got guys like Connor Stain, who's had a really good season down in Fresno. You've got Austin Eminer, who's been really interesting to watch. But then you've got your top guys like Carson Palmquist, Chase Dollander, and Sean Sullivan, who, Palmquist, if he can stay healthy, is a potential call-up this year, if not early next year. And then Dollander's on his way to Hartford after the All-Star break. And yeah. I'm surprised that it hasn't been announced that Sullivan's on his way as well, because Sullivan has been flat out dominant with the strikeout stuff down in Spokane.
Well, and then they went so heavy on pitching these past couple of years with college arms and everything in those early picks, where now this year it's finally comfortable. They've built up that starting pitching system where you can focus on some of the bats, and then you can get those guys that you can work on a little bit to develop instead of. They've got some immediate reinforcements that can help in the immediate future. And they've got some guys that can start to develop and get to a point where they can contribute down the line a bit.
And I do think the depth is going to get stronger after the deadline. We know that the Rockies are shopping Elias Diaz, who's on the final year of his contract. We found out pretty recently that they actually declined to engage in contract extension talks with Diaz, which is actually a really good sign from this organization. Shows an understanding of what they need to do, and hopefully they'll do it. But then we also have guys like Jacob Stallings. I would trade him while he's hot, but, we'll see what's going on with that. We're probably not going to be able to trade Jake Cave, but, whatever. And then the fact that both Austin Gomber and Cal Quantrill are on the market, you trade 2 big league ready pitchers that can contribute now and get some guys that contribute to the Rockies later on. So I'm looking forward to the deadline in a couple of weeks here to see what we do with all of that to further reinforce our pitching prospects, because we went heavy on loading up on young pitchers last year, and some of that's paying dividends.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of young pitchers, moving on to the 8th round.
Yeah, 8th round pick, we had Luke Jewett, a righty out of UCLA. The Rockies have been drafting a lot out of UCLA recently. Michael Tolia, Jake Bird, Sean Bouchard, and now Luke Jewett. And I will turn once again to my man Plant, who had some thoughts on Luke Jewett, who liked where we took Jewett. So I'll just go ahead and read from this again, because this is some pretty good analysis. Pretty much solely going to be a relief pitcher, and his 2022 season was better than his 2024. However, I think personally that's because he was moved to the rotation this year and did worse. I view him with a ceiling as a good setup guy. He's a righty when it comes to throwing, and while he had decent stats this past year, I like him more as that relief pitcher. Portion of me wonders if his decent stats was more so due to continued work and age growth. He has 4 pitches, a fastball that was 97 as a reliever and 92 as a starter, a slider that is sometimes at the mid-80s, and a curve that should only be used as a different pitch to fool batters as it sits around 75, and a changeup that's not that great. However, with that being said, count me as one of those who believe that the return from the bullpen would elevate his stuff, because when it's on, it's on. Unfortunately, when it's off, it's off. I could see a Fresno starting spot for him and be the root, but I fully expect if his stuff doesn't play well against a starter, he'll be a relief guy by the time he gets to Double-A. Mm-hmm. The intangibles in his stuff is certainly there, and he's still 21, so a little young. And a visit and stay in the Arizona pitch lab, I could see those miles per hour getting a little faster too.
There you go. Good, solid little arm, like we're talking about. Nothing too flashy, but there's that potential there that can maybe check a couple boxes. But another relief arm that can get in there and get you to some good innings.
Yeah, absolutely. And Plant, once again, thank you so much for contributing. Really appreciate it. We're going to take another quick little break here for the audio version of this podcast that's going to get uploaded tomorrow. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a second. All right, we're kind of lagging behind here. We're not through day 2, and we're through our second ad break. So we're going to speed things up a little bit. Number 9 pick, interesting first base prospect, Tommy Hopfee out of Fresno State. What do you think of Mr. Hopfee?
Another one of those versatile guys, plays infield, outfield, and a lot of that first base. Was a two-way player and switch hitter at Fresno State, which is always good. So it had a lot of that good offensive stuff. Didn't make a lot of appearances on the mound. Probably one of those guys that, hey, we just need some innings here at the end of the game type of thing. But a nice bat, nice solid, not too shabby. Had a little bit of pop in there, but just a good average, good contact, getting on base. Good stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't call him much of a pitcher, despite being a two-way player.
Yeah.
In 16 appearances with Fresno State on the mound, all in relief, 7.94 ERA, 15 earned runs, 16 total runs, 21 strikeouts to 6 walks, but also gave up 7 home runs.
Much better over his college career, which
Yeah.
was 68 appearances.
That HR9 last year of 3.7.
Yeah, I think he's going to be hitting.
Oh, yeah. And primarily a first baseman, though. He has even logged 1 appearance behind the plate. So Hunter Goodman, look out.
Yeah, but a good, just a nice little solid bat. It probably fits in that camp of like a Grant Levine, maybe, where we'll see what he can do and gives you some good outings, some good plate approach. But we'll see where he fits in that depth chart and just see how he develops down there in the minors.
And then I have another, our next guy, another pitcher. So here in the middle rounds and the late rounds is when the Rockies really got pitcher heavy. University of Florida right-hander Fisher Jameson. And I'm pulling up. So I actually reached out to our colleagues over at SB Nation to get some information on this guy, because we have a couple of Florida fans and Florida writers in there. And pulling him up right now. So David Rosenberg on Fisher Jameson said, a year ago, he was a guy you absolutely did not want to see on the mound, and then he became the best in a very inconsistent bullpen. Control really improved, and Florida's coaching staff loves developing an off speed. I don't think his stuff is great, but he could give a team a few years of long relief if things go right. And he's not kidding when it comes to last year. You didn't want to see him on the mound. In 11 outings, all in relief in 12.2 innings, he had a 13.5 ERA. He did strike out 15 hitters, but also had 7 walks, give up 4 home runs, and had an overall whip of 2.289. But then comes into this year, the walks are way more in line with his number of with his appearances. So 67.2 innings, 18 walks, 79 strikeouts. So he's got that walk rate down from 5 to 2.4, with the strikeout rate remaining around the same, and his ERA sitting at 3.99. So it could be really interesting. He's got some starting in his past. He only made 1 start for Florida this year, but he's made a couple starts throughout his career. Overall, a bullpen guy. But interesting to see.
Really working with 2 pitches, a 2-seamer and a slider. Good command of those 2. So that's 2 pitches. Usually you can make it as a reliever there. Good power, 2-seamer with some action, good slider. So yeah, a nice solid, another bullpen guy. He has a bullpen guy name. Do you want to face Fisher Jameson coming out of the bullpen with the lead on the line?
It is a good name. It's a very baseball name. I'm trying to find something on our next guy, because one of his teammates had absolutely glowing things to say about him, and that's Vanderbilt catcher Alan Espinal.
Alan.
Oh goodness, where was it? It was a guy who was drafted very high last year. I think he was drafted by the Orioles. Oh, it's going to drive me crazy that I can't find it. Oh, that's going to bother me so much. Maybe I'll find it by the end of the show. Alan Espinal is another power catcher.
Mm-hmm.
His actual plate approach is not very good, but if he makes contact, he hits it hard. But the big thing for him is he's another kind of leader with a lot of experience behind the plate. His defense needs polish, but his arm is really strong. And the Rockies love guys who are going to be able to throw out base runners.
Hey, yeah, I'll take it. Yeah, it's good offensive first, but there is some swing and miss in there. Consistent hitting. He's got the power when he gets a hold of it, kind of like a Michael Tolia. Make contact, ball's going to fly, but it's just a matter of doing that consistently, and then working on the defensive end of things and really building that up a bit more, which is always tough. But the Rockies have always, I think, done good, especially these past several years of working with defensive guys, working with them behind the dish. Hunter Goodman's not too bad behind there. Drew Romo's improved back there. Willie McIver's been good. So I think they're in a good spot where, okay, we can refine the bat and develop the catching side of things so we can become a complete player, because a catcher that can hit but not really receive very well, then you have Willie Rosario, and he can't really last much these days.
Yeah, it was tough with the Baby Bowl. But again, really interesting to see that the Rockies, selected multiple catchers in this draft. Again, shoring up sort of the depth down there, because outside of, we've got Drew Romo, we've got Willie McIver, Braxton Fulford. There's not a ton of catching depth in the organization right now. We had Cody Huff, who was traded in the Cal Quantrill acquisition. So I like that we picked a couple catchers here, and there are two catchers who are a little bit different, but also have some similarities.
Yeah,
they're different, but they're the same. And I found who it was. It was Enrique Bradfield Jr., who was drafted last year by the Baltimore Orioles. And he said, tons of emotion seeing this, the most selfless individual I have ever been around, the most hardworking person I've ever been around, one of my best friends, and I'm extremely proud of him, said Enrique Bradfield Jr. when the Rockies picked Alan Espinal in the 11th round. So that's really cool. I love seeing these guys who came up together and are friends, and then it's not. How can you not be romantic about baseball?
Yeah. Well, when the Rockies had some of those with Cole Messina, Jack Mahoney, was teammate there with him. He was happy. So it's always fun to see those connections and guys celebrating those that get drafted that they play with in college.
It's just nice. It's one of the big things about baseball is the camaraderie.
Yeah, it's special.
It is. Next guy we picked, 12th round, Everett Catlett out of Georgetown, a left-handed pitcher who is quite large. He's 6'7".
He's a big boy.
Fastball, not that hard a fastball that he throws. 90 to 93. It can touch 96, but there's a chance that he can continue, developing these pitchers and his velocity, because he only threw like 100 innings at the collegiate level. And his secondary pitch is a slider that worked really, really, really well. OPS against of 3.55. And then behind that, he's got a changeup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big, tall pitcher, and that's what they can use. That's what makes them effective. They can be deceptive using that body when it helps get that whip action. And then they can, you may throw at early mid-90s, but you can make it get even closer, make it seem even faster because of a length of stride when you're pitching, and it can get on a guy quicker. So kind of like that's how Sean Sullivan is, where because of his reach, it makes it seem it runs up on guys quicker than maybe you'd think. So
yeah, it's an interesting pick, and our friends over at Blake Street Banner mentioned this as well. If he can get his fastball up a couple ticks, working at the pitching lab and working through development, there's some real promise there for a really interesting guy.
Yeah, big, tall guy,
big boy.
Big boy.
He can join the big boy team.
Who is the Rockies' tallest pitcher they've ever had?
I feel like that's a Patrick Lyons question.
Patrick, if you're still here, you have some homework.
Yeah, let us know. Then we followed up a left-handed pitcher with another left-handed pitcher, Justin Lower out of LSU, a transfer to LSU. He actually spent his first 2 seasons in college at Xavier and had 2 pretty good seasons there. His gem season was 2023 last year in Xavier. We had a 1.89 ERA over 29 appearances, 1 start, the rest all out of the bullpen. 63 strikeouts to 22 walks, so there is some control there that needs to be developed. But then he moved over to LSU this year and facing the more difficult competition in 26 appearances, ERA of 5.92.
There you go. Is he a X-Man or a mutant of some kind if he was from Xavier University?
Hey, we were doing the Wolverine impressions in the episode that went up on Monday. Bub. Yeah, bub.
Another nice lefty. I'm always a sucker for those lefty pitchers because they are a weird breed. But yeah, another one of those kind of fits into that mold of a Kyle Freeland type where probably fits into that lefty prospect bullpen piece. It's just getting them a little bit more consistency there and being able to get things done on the mound. And I think he was definitely proving that over there at LSU. A bit tougher, but those seasons at Xavier University, I think, show of what he can do. And then you up to that tougher competition, still not a lot of work.
Big East to the SEC, a
Yeah.
little bit of a difference.
Yeah. And so probably a little bit of a culture shock there, but a durable arm that you can probably get out there, get more consistent, and then you can be a little bit more effective. Yeah. Team high 26 games for LSU.
And his big thing is his slider and his changeup. His fastball sits very low 90s. It maxes out at like 93. It's got some extension and it can be a little bit tricky, which gives it a little bit more play than it normally would. But, it's another guy who needs to maybe work on the fastball a little bit or get his breaking pitches to a point where he can rely solely on those. Mm-hmm. Next guy on our list out of the one junior college selection that the Rockies took, Sam Girth, a right-handed pitcher out of Navarro College in Texas. One of my favorite names of this draft.
He's only 6'3".
But is he wide?
Yeah.
It's Sam Girth, not Sam Length. He's a little bit of a project. He's a young guy. He's, I think, 19 years old. He really just graduated high school a year or two ago. Fastball can sit up to 95 and a really solid looking slider that can hit between 78 and 81. This is an interesting pick, especially because, like you said, he's only 6'3", but he's also young enough that he's still got growing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, eat some more of his Wheaties so he can get big. Cool thing, highest draft pick out of Navarro Junior College since Chris Davis was taken in the 5th round in 2006. That's CHRIS Davis.
The Chris Davis?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Crush Davis.
That's the other Chris. Crush Davis is KRIS.
Look, he's 247, Chris Davis.
Yeah, but he was also Crush. Next pick, we have moving on out of the MAC, my second favorite conference in all of sports. Girth is very important. Exactly. From Western Michigan, it is another right-handed pitcher, Luke Thalen. I'm probably saying that name wrong. Again, another primarily a reliever. Last year, he was primarily a starter, and it didn't go so great for him. It looks like they've tried a couple different things with him. He had 13 appearances all out of the bullpen in 22 for a 13.20 ERA. Then they moved him to starter. He started 10 games out of 12 appearances in 23 with an 8.20 ERA. And then last year, back to the bullpen, 25 appearances, 43 and a third innings, had a 3.53 ERA with 58 strikeouts for a strikeouts per 9 of 12.0.
Yeah, nice little reliever. No, you look at those relief numbers, and you'll take that. No, that's not too shabby. 21-year-old coming in there can throw some gas, getting there in the mid 90s, hit 97. Nice slider in there. So if he can just keep throwing strikes, I think that's the big thing. Guy that pounds the zone, and I think that's what the Rockies are looking for. A lot of these guys that have good stuff. It's, can they pound the zone? Can we help them develop into pounding the zone? Because that's important. Because walks will haunt, as Bud Black will say.
It also says a lot about the modern pitching environment where basically every pitcher the Rockies have selected is fastball slider.
Yeah. Because fastballs enable you to throw strikes.
Next guy is Kevin Fitzer, 16th round pick, first baseman outfielder out of Cal State Northridge. Good exit velocity, good raw power, has good contact and swing decisions. He doesn't chase a lot. Played a lot of left field. I think he might be a switch hitter. It's tough when we get up to these higher rounds because there's just less information available on him. I remember I used to do draft recaps on Reddit, and no, he's a right-handed batter, not a switch. Pardon me. I used to do these draft recaps on Reddit, especially when it went up to like 40 rounds back in the day. Where it was like, I need to find anything about this guy, and the best you can find is like a blurb in the local paper or something.
Miss Lippy's car is green.
What? That is not a reference I get.
Billy likes to drink soda. From Billy Madison.
Yeah, I haven't seen that movie in a very long time.
Yeah, looking at it, another one of those kind of versatile corner outfielders. He's got some speed, pretty quick out of the box. Some nice little pop. 19 home runs, 102 RBIs, and 21 stolen bases in 2020. That's over his career. So he's got a little bit of pop, some speed, but most of that was 11 home runs last season at Cal State Northridge. Nice on base. I think that's the big thing. Good on base. Can get on speedy on the box, out of the box. Can cover the corner outfield spots pretty well. So another one of those nice little versatile players that you can stick around.
And then coming up right after him, you've got another versatile player in kind of a weird combination. So first of all, the Rockies only drafted one middle infielder this year. Improvement? The Rockies have a lot of middle infielders within their system, is what I'm getting at here. But Nolan Clifford out of Creighton is an interesting combo because his primary position is shortstop and his secondary position is first base. And I feel like you don't really see those two go together.
Yeah, that's a really weird one. Unless you're like the super utility guy that plays second and third as well.
He's played a very small handful of third and a very small handful of second. He's never played second at the college level. At the college level, he has only played first base and shortstop.
Mm-hmm.
And 4 appearances as a pitcher, but it didn't go so great for him. So we're not going to talk about that. Speedy guy. I actually kind of like him. Good plate approach. 28 walks to 33 strikeouts in 41 games this year. 13 stolen bases, 2 caught stealing. Not a ton of pop, 5 home runs and 2 doubles, but still managed overall a .966 OPS during his time with Creighton last year. I really like this pick as sort of a back end. All right, I gotta not drafted by the Reds is a huge missed opportunity. It's Clifford, the big red dog.
Yeah, that is a missed opportunity. That a nice little defensive glove. Probably can work on some things, but your prototypical middle infielder, speedy. Can slap some hits around, draw some walks, get on base, use the speed, and then that can carry over onto the defensive side of things.
He's not as rangy as some other middle infield prospects. It kind of reminds me of Greg Jones. Greg Jones isn't that rangy, but he's got good speed.
Yeah.
But the thing about Clifford is, good hands, good gloves. He's nimble enough to make it work. I like it. I think it's a really solid pick, honestly.
Yeah, he's really big on friendship and teaching life lessons to little kids.
He's large.
Yeah.
I don't think he's actually that large.
No. he's 5'10".
So he's Clifford the moderately, the average height dog.
Clifford, the average sized middle infielder.
Yeah, he's basically my Garrett Hampson replacement, though drafted way later. He's quick. He plays middle infield. What's not to like?
I don't know. We'll see.
I'm asking you, what's not to like?
I don't know.
Our next guy is the guy whose name we were making fun of before we started recording. It's Tyler Hampu from Austin, PA State University.
Not making fun of, joking about.
We're laughing with him, not at him.
Yeah. He's already accomplished more than I ever have.
Oh, absolutely. Austin, PA University. He's a right-handed pitcher. He's got power, but needs a lot of cleanup. Mid-90s fastball. And I'm stealing some things now from Blake Street Banner because we're so deep into the draft that their analysis is some of the only stuff that we get. So a huge shout out to them for compiling all this stuff. But fastball can hit 98, and it's got good movement to it. It's a good pitch, though it gets hit a lot. He can also miss bats with it. His big pitches, again, are slider and changeup. It's that sort of classic bullpen combo the Rockies really like. The changeup is really interesting. It's mentioned as having heavy fade. The slider is pretty simple, but both of these pitches can hit in the high 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, struck out 75 through 56 innings this past year in 37 games. So he's got that power arm, and that's what you notice a lot through these Rockies. A lot of these relievers, guys that they drafted, power arms with ability to get punch outs. It's just refining them into pitchers instead of just throwers.
It feels like the Rockies are getting a little bit more modern with this, because we think about in the past and even the last couple of years, how few bullpen arms, how few pitchers even in the organization could throw high 90s heat or even higher velocity breaking stuff. And then Victor Vodnik's really been the first in a while coming in and throwing, being able to max out at 100 in his fastball. And now we're getting all these guys who can throw that high 90s heat. It's nice to see the Rockies more modernizing instead of that cookie cutter bullpen approach where everybody's low to mid 90s and everybody's throwing the same thing. I like this. I like the change.
And it's helping guys learn how to command that heat is the big thing, because Justin Lawrence was coming in throwing 102, but now he's pumped the brakes on that gas so much because he couldn't throw strikes. It's helping guys. You can be the power arm, you can get strikeouts, but you've just got to learn to command the fastball, command that heat, so you can take advantage and get the strikeouts.
Yeah. Throwing 99 is great, but it's not so great if it's nowhere near the strike zone.
Yeah, and that's converting these guys from just throwers, which you can do in college and high school and growing up, but turning them into pitchers, where then you can learn to command this and paint the fastball and set up your breaking balls, your off-speed pitches, your secondaries and stuff.
Yeah. Hampu does have a pretty high ERA for his time in college, over 47 appearances, a 7.69 career ERA in 2 seasons with Austin, PA. But again, he's an 18th round pick. These guys are going to be projects where we're trying to, I really like the potential in this guy, and we're going to try and see if we can build on that. That's the big thing to remember with these with these late round guys. So a lot of it is potential and seeing what you can build on it.
Yeah. You just throw a dartboard and see what sticks.
19th round, we have Nathan Blasik, a right-handed pitcher from the University of New Orleans. He is a lower arm angle, lower arm slot guy. He's not your Justin Lawrence sidearm or full crouch down Adam Simber kind of guy, but it's a really low 3/4 slot. So he's got that sort of deception in his delivery, and he gets a lot of ground balls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just seeing clips of him throwing, just that movement it creates kind of cut on a ball, and I think that's kind of how I would always throw a pitch. So you can get kind of your fastballs that get that inner cutting. It's kind of like, without even intentionally, you can cause everything to kind of turn into a cutter or a 2-seamer. We get some nice movement just because of that low arm slot, and just coming off the fingers, it creates that motion that forces it to naturally cut and dip. And so that's kind of what he does to get his ground balls and everything, and generates whiffs on change-ups, off-speed pitches. A nice little bullpen piece you can get a look at.
Yeah, I'm watching probably the same clip that you are watching his delivery, and it's funky because his windup looks pretty traditional, but then he goes into that way lower 3/4 arm slot, and it's a funky one.
Yeah, it's not quite, if you're looking at a clock, it's not quite 3 o'clock. It's probably about like 2:45, 2:30.
Yeah, it's almost
that
3
slot.
o'clock. You're sitting in the classroom and you're just watching that clock tick by, and it's so close.
Because there's your 3/4. It's probably right around down here. And so coming across, that creates that cut on that ball.
I like it. I honestly like. There's not a ton of big name guys, especially after day one for the Rockies, but there are some really, really interesting picks in here. And the final pick of the Rockies draft class in the 20th round, his name is Hunter Omlid from Arizona State. He's 24 years old. I believe he's the oldest player that the Rockies drafted in this draft, with a solid fastball that can hit high 90s, but mostly sits mid 90s. So kind of a power fastball that, if utilized correctly, Blake Sheebrander calls it a flat approach angle, and a sweeper or really sweepy slider with a high spin rate. Inconsistency in the break and location, and then also a changeup with run. So another guy who needs a lot of work, but there's some really interesting stuff in there. And what interests me on here is the specificity of this is a pitch that looks good at the top of the zone with that fastball, because what are we used to right now with the Rockies? Throw it at the knees.
Down and away.
And we've seen Victor Vodnik really thrive with his fastball throwing it high in the zone.
Yeah. If you can command a fastball up in the zone, you are a dangerous hitter, because it just sets up your other pitches so much better when you can command the fastball. And I think that's what it's going to be a theme with a lot of these arms that they took in these, especially these later rounds, helping these guys learn to command the fastball, paint the zone with the fastball. So then it can help set up and develop your other pitches. Because if you don't have a fastball, you become a lot easier to hit against, because if you can't throw strikes with a fastball, it makes it really tough to set up your other pitches.
Yeah,
and it's taking one pitch out of your arsenal.
Unless you're really consistent with those breaking pitches, you've got to be able to throw that fastball.
Yeah. And even then you become predictable, because, I know he can't throw a fastball here, so I'll just sit on this curveball and boom, it's hit 430 feet.
It's a breaking pitch. You want to feel really old, Skyler?
No.
Well, that's too bad. The Rockies only drafted 3 guys born before 2002.
We just turn into the guy from Indiana Jones.
It's pretty rough. So I am correct that Hunter Omlid is the oldest guy drafted by the Rockies this year, May 31st, 2000, followed by Kevin Fitzer from Cal State Northridge, October 16th, 2001. And sorry, I got the order backwards. And then Nathan Blasik is a June baby from 2001. And wow, that makes me feel old.
Wow. They're slightly older than the Nintendo GameCube.
It's like, what is this, like, what's a retro Final Fantasy game? Oh, like 2 or 3, one of the ones on the Super Nintendo. Then you hit them with Final Fantasy X came out over 20 years ago.
They just turn into Saving Private Matt Damon and Saving Private Ryan.
Hey, we all get old eventually. But that's the draft. We're still waiting to see if the Rockies sign any undrafted players. But overall, I think a pretty solid 21 guys selected by the Rockies this year. I've seen multiple grades for the Rockies. I've seen them in the A range. I've seen them in the B. I've seen them in the C's. Skyler, how would you grade the Rockies draft this year?
Charlie Condon alone makes it an A for me. No, but and realistically, I'd say it a good B+, good B+, A-, somewhere in there. Just because they focused a lot. I think Condon carries a lot of this because, like you said, there's a lot of projects in there, a lot of guys that they'd have to work on. But those first 5 rounds, a lot of good arms and good bats with upside and versatility. Now, it's guys in this draft, it's kind of convoluting the system a little more. They're going to have to make some decisions and give a clear path forward of what's going to go on with the big league roster. But overall, I think it was a nice, solid draft with an emphasis on just good hitters, good all-around hitters. I think that was a big thing that we're seeing in guys that can lift a ball, hit with some power, and just get on base, draw some walks. Not a lot of strikeout type guys, but guys that can just hit. Guys that got that dog in them, literally, because they were from Georgia Bulldogs. And then just pitchers that a wide variety of power pitchers, and guys that just need command control and some development there, projects in process. But overall, a nice solid draft.
I'm really sitting about that same way. I think if you remove Condon, the Rockies draft would get much less a high grade. Like if you remove Condon, we're probably sitting like a C+.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot to like, but there's also a lot of, question marks and guys that are going to be developmental projects. Though I think Brody Brecht, if they can make that work, even removing Condon, I would up this draft to at least a B. But I'm sitting around where you are, with Condon, because of course I'm sitting like an A- or a B+. I think Charlie Condon is an extremely exciting prospect. And I know that some people are like, well, we should have taken pitchers because the Rockies always need pitchers, or there were other guys we should have taken. I was kind of expecting Condon to be gone by the time the Rockies drafted. I expected him to go second to the Reds or something like that. And so I was thinking, the Rockies are probably going to draft Jack Caglione, and, that's fine if they keep him as a two-way player. But no, honestly, the way the cards fell, I'm really happy. The simple aspect of best player available, and that is who Condon was.
Yeah, and there was like this class this year it wasn't as strong as it has been in other years. So all things considered, the Rockies did okay with just the question marks around this draft in general, with just the talent question marks. A lot of guys in that first round, especially position players, were the name of the game this year for a lot of teams, because that was just the better college talent this year, and pitchers were still kind of okay. Like even Chase Burns had question marks about him, where he still has command issues he needs to work on and stuff like that. So overall, with what they're working with, what was available, they hit well on their first pick, and that's really the one that matters the most. And then some good sneaky picks in there. Cole Messina, I think I really like that pick. And like you said, Brody Brecht, Jared Thomas, another good one. So there's some sneaky good picks in there. It's just a matter of, it's a good test of where the Rockies at as an organization development-wise. Can they get it done? Can they help these guys develop to where they're effective professional baseball players?
And I think for Condon in the first round, a big part of it is the Rockies could use some more first round wins.
Yeah.
Because in the 2010s, not a lot of wins when it came to their first round picks.
John Gray, Kyle Freeland,
and that is all.
That's mostly it.
Brendan Rodgers, he at least made the majors.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call that one a win, but a consolation.
Tyler Anderson was solid
for like a year.
Yeah, but here's 2010. Kyle Parker, Peter Tago, Tyler Anderson, Trevor Story, David Dahl, Eddie Butler, John Gray, Kyle Freeland, Forrest Wall, Brendan Rodgers, Mike Nicorak, Tyler Nevin, Riley Pint, Robert Tyler, Ryan Rollison, Michael Tolia. That is 2010 to 2019.
Yeah. And then we're still waiting on first round wins from 2020 onward.
Yeah. And I would say there are some that are really close. So 2020 onward, Zach Veen, if he can stay healthy and really get things figured out at AA, great. I think that's going to be one. Benny Montgomery, I love Benny. You love Benny, but his injury history is already quite concerning.
Poor guy.
Just really give me David Dahl flashbacks. Gabriel Hughes looking really promising if he can recover from Tommy John surgery well. Sterling Thompson has shown a lot of promise as well. Jordan Beck has already made his big league debut. Chase Dollander has been fantastic down in High A Spokane, and now Charlie Condon. So getting a string of first round wins, like what was it with the Baltimore Orioles that made them all of a sudden really threatening? Is they drafted really well and developed really well, especially with their can't miss draft picks.
They also kept cloning all these generic white looking dudes with their
generic white
curly
creative player.
Yeah. They're Joe Randoms.
I forget which one of their Joe Randoms said it, but one of them was asked, what are your thoughts about the fact that you all look the freaking same? And he was like, what can we say? The Orioles have a type.
Yeah, they certainly do, as evidenced by their first round pick this year.
All right. My last question before we wrap it up. What is your favorite? Who do you think is going to be sneaky good out of this draft?
Like I already said, Cole Messina, Moose. Nice, solid bat, good catcher. Got him in the 3rd round. Best catcher in college baseball in D1 this year. So sneaky good.
For me, I'm really curious about Tommy Hopke out of Fresno State. I don't know if he's going to be a steal or anything like that, but he intrigues me. The same with Nolan Clifford. Like, I tend to latch on to guys who I find really interesting, even if they're not necessarily going to be the best player ever. And those are the two that I am really curious about.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Goodness me, what a long show for a Wednesday night. My old bones should be in bed. It's 7:48.
Yeah.
No.
We still got time.
I'm cold and there are wolves outside. Oh. But, I think that's going to do it here for us on Affected by Altitude special live draft recap edition. Thank you so much for everybody in the comments who's joining us. Comments from Patrick Lyons, Rockies, Sweden. It was great to hear from you. Thank you to Plant for contributing via a Discord server as well. Love getting input from everybody. Really appreciate everyone who listens and everyone who tuned in tonight. And of course, we really appreciate everyone who's going to tune in to the recorded version that's going to be going up on your favorite podcasting platform of choice tomorrow. So, Skyler, where can the folks find you at?
Find me over on Twitter at sideline_crowd, and writing Wednesday rock piles for purplerow.com and writing stuff over at fansfirstsports.com.
Beautiful. You can find me on Twitter at Evan_Lang27. You can find me writing the Monday Rock Pile and Weekly Pebble Report over at purplerow.com. I want to give a huge shout out to our man, Mac Wilcox, who really killed it with draft coverage on day one. Huge shout out to him. He's, former part of the show, and we still have a lot of affection for him. You can find Rocky Mountain Rooftop on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Rocky Mountain Rooftop. That's at ROCKYMTN Rooftop. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. And Skyler, how about you hit him with it?
Farewell!
Farewell!
Farewell! I'll put a little live. Ma! Deborah!